Jason was not the kind of person who made waves. He didn't like drama. He didn't enjoy arguing. And he definitely didn't want to be known as that guy on the block. He lived a quiet, peaceful life in a modest neighborhood just outside the city. His house wasn't the biggest or fanciest on the street, but it was clean, well-kept, and most importantly, his own. He worked a regular job at a hardware store, helping people find tools, paint, light bulbs, and sometimes even advice. He liked working with his hands. When he got home, he liked to spend time in his yard, not because he was some kind of gardening expert, but because he enjoyed the peace that came with trimming hedges, watering plants, and sitting on his porch, with a cold drink after a long day. His backyard was small but tidy. There was a little patch of grass, a few flower pots he bought from a discount store, and a garden hose he kept neatly coiled near the side of the house. That hose had been through a lot, sun, rain, snow, but it still worked just fine. It was reliable, like Jason himself. Now, across the fence lived someone very different. Her name was Marjorie. Everyone in the neighborhood knew her, whether they wanted to or not. She was in her late 60s, always dressed like she was about to go to church, even when she was doing yard work, and never afraid to speak her mind. Loudly. She was one of those people who thought it was her job to make sure everyone followed the rules, even if the rules were silly, outdated, or mostly ignored by everyone else. She wasn't officially part of the Homeowners Association, HOA, but she acted like she was their top enforcer. If your trash can was out 5 minutes past the pickup time, she'd leave you a note. If your mailbox was a little crooked, she'd report it. If you put up a holiday decoration 2 days before Thanksgiving, she'd send a passive-aggressive email to the HOA board. Most people tried to ignore her. Some rolled their eyes behind her back. A few had even moved away just to escape her constant nagging. But no one ever stood up to her. Until now. Jason had lived next to Marjorie for about 2 years before things started going downhill. At first she seemed okay. She waved when she saw him, said "Good morning" with a fake smile. But it didn't take long for her true colors to show. It started small. One afternoon Jason noticed that his garden hose wasn't where he left it. He found it lying across the lawn, half unwound and dripping water. He shrugged it off. Maybe the wind pulled it loose, or maybe one of the neighbor kids played with it. But then it happened again, and again. Each time the hose would mysteriously end up on Marjorie's side of the fence, connected to her outdoor spigot. Sometimes it was still running. Once he even saw her using it to wash her car. When he asked around, nobody admitted to borrowing it. So he figured, maybe Marjorie? He didn't want to jump to conclusions. After all, it was possible someone else had done it. Maybe the mailman? Or a delivery driver? Or a stray dog tugging at it? So he decided to set up a camera. Not a fancy one. Just a cheap security camera he bought online and mounted near his back window. It faced the side of the house, where the hose was kept. He didn't tell anyone what he was doing. He just wanted answers. The footage came back clear. There she was, in broad daylight. No shame, hooking up his hose like it belonged to her. Watering her flowers, washing her patio furniture, even rinsing off her muddy garden boots. Like she owned the thing. Jason watched the video in disbelief. Who did this woman think she was? He felt angry, but more than that, he felt violated. That hose was his. It wasn't expensive, but it was his. And Marjorie didn't even ask. She just took it. He debated what to do. Confront her? Report her to the HOA? Let it slide and hope she stopped? In the end, he chose the simplest option. He talked to her. "Hey," he said one morning, standing near the fence while she was pruning her roses. Marjorie looked up, surprised. "Yes? I noticed that you've been using my garden hose without asking?" "Oh," she said, brushing dirt off her gloves. "I didn't realize it was yours. I thought it was community property. It's attached to my house, Jason replied, and it's not labeled community. I don't remember inviting anyone to use it. Well, it's such a nice hose, she said almost smugly. You should be proud people appreciate it. That's not how this works, Jason said, trying to keep calm. If you need to borrow something, just ask. Don't just take it. Marjorie gave him a look, the kind of look that said, "Who do you think you are, talking to me like that?" "You know," she said slowly, "neighbors should share. It's called being friendly." "This isn't sharing," Jason shot back. "This is stealing," Marjorie scoffed. "Oh, please, it's just a hose. Lighten up." Then she turned and walked inside, leaving Jason standing there, jaw clenched, fists tight. That night, he posted about the encounter on Reddit. He titled it, "HOA Karen keeps using my hose. Without asking, what should I do?" The post blew up. Hundreds of comments poured in. Some people told him to let it go. Others suggested he lock the hose up. One person even joked, "Hook it up to a sewage tank and see what happens." Jason laughed when he read that one. It was ridiculous. He wasn't the type to play pranks, especially not gross ones. But as the days went by and Marjorie continued to help herself to his hose, ignoring his request entirely, Jason started to feel something shift inside him. Respect, boundaries, fairness. None of it mattered to Marjorie, and that's when he realized polite words weren't going to change anything. Something bigger needed to happen. But we'll get to that later. For now, this was just the beginning. After their little chat at the fence, Jason thought things might change. He wasn't expecting a heartfelt apology or anything like that. He just hoped Marjorie would stop using his hose without asking. But no such luck. The very next day, there it was again, hooked up to her spigot, water running like nothing had happened. She didn't even try to hide it. In fact, she looked proud, standing there in her gardening gloves, watering her tulips like she owned the whole block. Jason watched from his window, jaw tight, hands clenched around his coffee mug. He felt the same frustration bubbling inside him like hot steam in a pressure cooker. He walked outside, ready to say something else, but as soon as Marjorie saw him coming, she turned off the hose, rolled it up neatly, and gave him a fake smile. "Morning," she said cheerfully, like they were best friends who hadn't just had a serious conversation the day before. Jason crossed his arms. "You used my hose again." Marjorie blinked slowly, like he was speaking another language. "I did," she said. "And I'm sorry if that bothers you, but really, dear, you should be more neighborly." "My name isn't Dear," Jason replied, trying hard not to raise his voice. "And I asked you not to use it without asking. You ignored me." "Oh, lighten up," she said, waving a hand. "It's not like you were using it. Besides, we all share this street together. If everyone acted like you, imagine how unfriendly this place would be." Jason couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You think taking someone else's stuff without asking is friendly?" he asked. "To me?" "Yes," she said simply. "To you? Well, maybe you should learn to share." Then, with a smug look on her face, she picked up the hose, carried it back to Jason's side of the fence, dropped it unceremoniously on the ground, and went inside without another word. Jason stood there staring at the hose like it had personally betrayed him. This wasn't just about the hose anymore. It was about respect, or lack thereof. Marjorie didn't care about boundaries. She didn't care about privacy. She didn't care about rules unless they benefited her. She thought she could do whatever she wanted because she was older, louder, and believed herself to be the neighborhood queen. Well, she was wrong. That night, Jason sat at his kitchen table, scrolling through the comments on his Reddit post. The thread had grown even bigger since yesterday. People were sharing their own stories about entitled neighbors, HOA bullies, and people who took advantage of others' kindness. One comment caught his eye. "Bro, Just hook the hose up to something nasty. See how long she lasts when she gets sprayed with something gross. At first Jason laughed. It was funny, ridiculous even. But then he stopped laughing because deep down he kind of liked the idea. He didn't want to hurt anyone or cause real damage. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to teach Marjorie a lesson. A harmless prank. Something embarrassing enough to make her think twice before helping herself to other people's things. He closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair. Was he really considering this? He wasn't a mean person. He never got into fights. He never played pranks. He didn't even honk his horn when people cut him off, unless they really deserved it. But Marjorie had pushed him past polite behavior. She didn't listen to words. She only responded to consequences, so maybe it was time to give her one. The next morning, Jason started planning. First, he needed a way to make the hose look normal but deliver something unpleasant. Water was fine, but not clean water. Maybe something dirty. Not dangerous, just yucky enough to make a point. He remembered his friend Mike, who worked in sanitation. He borrowed a small portable sewage tank from him under the excuse that he needed something to test out a pump. Mike raised an eyebrow but handed over the tank anyway. "Don't let it leak in your car," he warned. "I won't," Jason promised. Back home, Jason set up the tank behind some bushes where nobody could see it. Then he connected the garden hose to it. He made sure everything looked normal from the outside. No strange smells. No weird noises. Just a regular hose hooked up to a mystery box. He smiled to himself. This was going to be good. The next step was waiting for the right moment. Over the next few days, Marjorie kept doing her thing, using the hose like it belonged to her. Every time she hooked it up, Jason watched from his window, waiting for the perfect time to strike. He didn't want to do it too soon. He wanted her to feel comfortable, confident, smug, because once she realized what was happening, that smug look would disappear fast. Finally, the big day came. Early in the morning, Jason heard the sound of the hose being turned on. He peeked out the window. There she was, Marjorie, wearing her gardening gloves, holding the nozzle like she was queen of the garden. She turned on the water and screamed. The stream that came out wasn't clear. It was brown, thick, and it smelled awful. Marjorie jumped back, dropping the nozzle as sewage water sprayed across her flowers and onto her white gardening pants. "What the?" she shrieked, hopping backward like she'd been burned. Jason almost fell over, laughing. He grabbed his phone and snapped a quick video from the window, just enough to capture her flailing and yelling. Then he ducked back inside, biting his lip to keep from bursting out laughing. Outside, Marjorie was still shouting, "This is disgusting! Who did this? Jason, was this you?" She stormed toward his house, knocking loudly on the door. Jason opened it, putting on his best confused face. "Yes? Did you do this?" she demanded, pointing at the mess on her yard and clothes. "I don't know what you're talking about," Jason said innocently. "You hooked your hose to sewage," she yelled. "That sounds illegal," Jason said, still pretending. "Why would I do that?" Marjorie glared at him, eyes full of fury. "This isn't over," she threatened. Then she stomped away, muttering to herself as she tried to wipe brown goo off her shoes. Jason shut the door, leaned against it, and finally let himself laugh. Hard. He knew this wouldn't be the end of it. Marjorie wasn't the type to walk away quietly. She'd probably go to the HOA, maybe even call the police. But he also knew something else. For the first time since moving next to her, he had stood up for himself. And for once, he had the upper hand. The next few days were intense. Jason had expected some kind of reaction from Marjorie after the sewage hose incident. He figured she'd yell at him again, maybe leave a nasty note on his door or throw garden clippings over the fence like last time. But this was worse. Much worse. It started early Monday morning when Jason heard loud voices outside. He looked through the blinds and saw Marjorie standing near the sidewalk, talking to two men in official-looking uniforms. One had a clipboard, the other held a camera, HOA inspectors. Great. He groaned and pulled on a hoodie before stepping outside. "Well, look who finally shows up," Marjorie said loudly, pointing at Jason like he was a criminal caught red-handed. One of the inspectors turned to him. "Mr. Thompson, we're here about a complaint filed by your neighbor." "I can guess what it's about," Jason said, crossing his arms. Marjorie smirked. "You sprayed me with sewage, young man." "It wasn't sewage," Jason corrected calmly. "It was wastewater from a portable tank, totally legal for testing purposes." "That doesn't make it okay," she snapped. "Actually," one of the inspectors said, flipping through his notes, "we need to confirm if there was any violation of sanitation laws or HOA rules." "There most definitely was," Marjorie insisted. "I was attacked with filth." "You used his hose without permission," the other inspector pointed out. "Multiple times." Marjorie froze. Her face turned red, not just from anger, but from embarrassment. "This isn't about that," she said quickly. "This is about him taking matters into his own hands." Jason raised his hands. "I didn't threaten her. I didn't hit her. I didn't even touch her. All I did was protect my property." The inspectors looked at each other. "We'll need to investigate further," one of them said. "We'll be in touch." Then they left. Marjorie glared at Jason one last time before storming off toward her house. Jason went back inside, heart still pounding. Later that day, Jason posted a short update on Reddit. Update: HOA Karen kept using my hose, so I hooked it to a sewage tank. She reported me to the HOA. They came today. They said they'll investigate. Not sure what happens next, but I stand by what I did. Within hours, the thread exploded again. Hundreds of comments poured in. Some people were supportive. She deserved it. Finally, someone stood up to an HOA Karen. If she wants to steal, she should expect consequences. Others warned him, "Be careful, people like her don't give up easily. She might sue you. Don't let her turn this around on you." Jason read every comment carefully. He knew this wasn't over. In fact, it was probably just getting started. The next morning, Jason found a thick envelope in his mailbox. Not a letter, a notice, from the HOA. It said he was being investigated for unsanitary use of private property and harassment of a neighbor. Harassment? That made Jason laugh out loud. He hadn't harassed anyone. He had simply protected his own stuff. Still, the pressure was starting to build. His phone buzzed constantly. Texts from friends asking what happened. Calls from curious neighbors. Even a reporter from a local blog reached out after seeing the Reddit post go viral. Jason didn't want to become a public figure. He just wanted peace. But now, he was in the middle of something bigger than himself. Meanwhile, life in the neighborhood began to change. People started avoiding Marjorie. Some ignored her. Others gave her side-eye when she walked past. Kids stopped picking flowers from her yard. Old Mrs. Jenkins, who used to chat with her every morning, stopped saying hello. Even the mailman took a different route. Word had spread fast, and people were choosing sides. Some thought Jason had gone too far. A few older folks muttered things, like, "You shouldn't play dirty," and "There's no excuse for revenge," but most people quietly agreed with him. They had all dealt with Marjorie in one way or another, and now, for once, someone had actually stood up to her, and won. But Jason's struggle wasn't over. The HOA scheduled a hearing. He had to attend and explain his actions. He hired a small-town lawyer named Mr. Collins, who specialized in property disputes. "You've got a point," Mr. Collins said, reviewing the case. "But you also crossed a line. You could have locked the hose up instead of playing a prank. I tried everything else, Jason argued. I asked nicely. I put up cameras. I even talked to her directly. She kept ignoring me. Mr. Collins nodded slowly. Well, we'll argue self-defense of property. That might work. The hearing was set for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, Jason braced himself for whatever came next. Would he get fined? Would Marjorie win? Would he lose the support of the community? He didn't know. All he knew was that he couldn't back down now. One night, Jason sat outside on his porch, staring at the hose coiled neatly beside him. He remembered how simple life used to be, how peaceful. Now everything felt like a battle, but he also felt something else. Strength. He had stood up for himself. He had taken action when nobody else would. And even though the fight wasn't over yet, he knew he had already won something important. Respect. The day of the HOA hearing finally arrived. Jason stood outside the small community center where the meeting was being held. He looked around and saw familiar faces, some neighbors, a few reporters, and even a couple of people who had commented on his Reddit post offering support. He took a deep breath and walked inside. Inside, the room was quiet but tense. A long table was set up at the front with 5 HOA board members sitting behind it. They all wore serious expressions and had folders full of notes in front of them. Marjorie was already there, seated near the front row with her lawyer, a tall man in a suit that probably cost more than Jason's car. Jason sat down next to Mr. Collins, his own lawyer, who gave him a calm nod. "Stay cool," Mr. Collins whispered. "We stick to the facts." Across the room, Marjorie caught Jason's eye and gave him a smug little smile, like she already knew she'd won. The meeting started. First, the HOA chairwoman introduced everyone and explained the rules. Then, it was time for statements. Marjorie went first. She stood up, straightened her blazer, and spoke in a clear, confident voice. "I have lived in this neighborhood for over 20 years, she began. "I've always followed the rules. I've always tried to be a good neighbor. But recently I've been targeted by Mr. Thompson, who decided to take revenge on me in a very cruel and unsanitary way." She turned slightly toward Jason. "He hooked his garden hose to a sewage tank and used it to spray me without warning. I was gardening peacefully when I was suddenly drenched in filth. It was disgusting, it was dangerous, and it was personal." A few people in the audience shifted uncomfortably. Jason rolled his eyes. Mr. Collins stood up next. "We're not here to deny what happened," he said calmly, "but we are here to explain why it happened." He turned to the board. "My client repeatedly asked Mrs. Marjorie to stop using his property without permission. She ignored those requests. She continued to use his hose, even after being directly told not to. She claimed it was community property and called my client selfish for wanting to protect his own belongings." There were murmurs from the crowd. Collins continued. In response, Mr. Thompson rigged the hose in a way that would discourage further misuse. No one was harmed. There was no intent to injure. It was a prank meant to teach a lesson about boundaries. He paused. "And let's not forget, this all started because Mrs. Marjorie refused to respect someone else's privacy and property." Jason stayed silent, watching the board members closely. They didn't look angry. They looked thoughtful. After both sides finished speaking, the HOA board stepped out to discuss their decision. The room buzzed with quiet conversations. Some people supported Jason. Others thought he had gone too far. Then, after nearly an hour, the board returned. The chairwoman cleared her throat. "We've reached a decision," she said. Everyone fell silent. The HOA acknowledges that Mr. Thompson's actions were unorthodox and could have been handled differently. However, we also recognize that repeated requests to stop unauthorized use of private property were ignored. She looked at Marjorie. "We remind all residents that borrowing or using another person's property without permission is a violation of HOA guidelines. We encourage open communication and mutual respect between neighbors. Then she looked at Jason. While Mr. Thompson's method was inappropriate, we do not believe formal disciplinary action is necessary at this time. Gasps, whispers, some applause. Jason let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Marjorie, on the other hand, looked stunned. "This isn't fair," she said, standing up abruptly. "He attacked me." "No, Mrs. Marjorie," the chairwoman replied firmly. "You failed to respect boundaries. This is a warning to everyone in the neighborhood. Talk to your neighbors before taking things that aren't yours." And with that, the meeting ended. People began filing out of the room. Jason felt like a weight had lifted off his shoulders. The next few days brought something Jason never expected. Support. Not just online, but in real life. Neighbors who had once kept to themselves now waved at him as they passed. Kids smiled when they saw him. Even old Mr. Jenkins, who had always sided with Marjorie, gave him a thumbs up. "You did what we were all too scared to do," one neighbor told him. "You made her realize she's not queen of the block," said another. Meanwhile, Marjorie became more isolated than ever. She stopped walking around the neighborhood like she owned it. She stopped yelling at kids for stepping on her lawn. She even stopped watering her flowers. One day, Jason noticed a "for sale" sign in her front yard. He almost laughed out loud. But the biggest surprise came a week later. Jason received a message from the local news blog that had been following the story. "Your story has gone viral again. People love you. We want to interview you." Jason hesitated. He wasn't looking for fame. He just wanted peace. Still, maybe telling his story could help others. So he agreed. The interview was short but powerful. He talked about respecting boundaries, about how people often ignore polite requests until consequences force them to listen, about how sometimes standing up for yourself is the only way to be heard. It was posted online. Within hours, it had thousands of views. Messages poured in from strangers across the country. "This happened to me, too. Glad someone finally stood up to an HOA Karen. Keep fighting for your rights." Even some lawyers and etiquette experts shared the story, talking about the fine line between self-defense and revenge. Jason wasn't a hero, but he was a symbol. As he sat on his porch that evening, sipping a cold drink, Jason looked around. His yard was quiet. No hose missing. No mysterious water spraying across the fence. Just peace. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had earned it. Time passed. The HOA hearing was behind him. The mess with the hose was cleaned up. The video had gone viral, the Reddit thread had cooled down, and life slowly returned to normal, or at least a new kind of normal. Jason wasn't famous anymore, but he was respected. He still lived in the same house, still watered his plants with the same old hose, now kept safely inside the garage, and still enjoyed sitting on his porch every evening with a cold drink in hand. But something had changed. Not just around him, but in him. He used to be the quiet guy who avoided conflict. He would rather keep his head down than deal with drama. He believed that if you were polite and did the right thing, people would treat you the same way. Now, he knew better. Sometimes being polite wasn't enough. Sometimes standing up for yourself meant doing something unexpected, even if it made people talk. And sometimes, people like Marjorie only understood consequences when they felt them personally. Marjorie left the neighborhood not long after the HOA meeting. She put her house up for sale, packed her things, and disappeared one weekend without saying goodbye. Some neighbors said she moved in with her daughter out of town. Others heard she joined a retirement community where no one dared question her authority. Either way, she was gone. And with her gone, the whole block seemed lighter. People smiled more. Kids played outside again. Neighbors talked to each other. without worrying about getting reported for hanging one sock too far over the clothesline. It was like a weight had been lifted. Even the flowers in front of Jason's house seemed to grow taller. One afternoon, Jason got a letter in the mail. It was from the HOA. At first he almost didn't open it, just in case it brought back any trouble. But curiosity won. Inside was a short note. Dear Mr. Thompson, we wanted to inform you that your case has officially been closed. After reviewing all evidence and community feedback, we have decided not to impose fines or penalties. We hope this issue has brought awareness to the importance of communication and mutual respect between neighbors. Thank you for your cooperation. Sincerely, HOA Board. Jason read it twice, then he folded it carefully and placed it on the kitchen counter. No victory dance, no celebration, just peace. Still, life didn't stay quiet forever. About a month later, Jason received another message, this time from someone he didn't expect. Reddit. The moderators of the Entitled People subreddit reached out to him. They wanted to feature his story as one of their top posts of the year. Jason thought about it for a while. He had already shared everything online once. Did he really want to do it again? But then he remembered the messages he had received. People who had gone through the same thing. People who had been taken advantage of by nosy neighbors, pushy family members, or arrogant co-workers. They needed to know, standing up for yourself isn't wrong, so he agreed. The post came back with a new title. HOA Karen. Kept using my hose, so I hooked it to a sewage tank. Update. She's gone. It blew up again. Old fans returned. New readers found the story. Memes were made. Some even turned the story into short videos. This time, though, Jason didn't feel nervous. He watched the comments roll in with a smile. You're my hero. She had it coming. I wish I had your courage. Glad someone finally stood up to a Karen. And one comment stood out more than the rest. Thanks for reminding me that it's okay to protect what's yours. Jason replied to that one. You're welcome. Just make sure you pick your battles wisely. As the months passed, Jason's life settled into a new rhythm. He started locking his gates at night. He kept the hose inside. He even added a small sign near the fence that simply said, "Please ask before using." Nobody ever touched it again. Neighbors began treating him like part of the community. Not because he demanded it, but because he earned it. Kids knocked on his door asking for help fixing bikes. Old Mrs. Jenkins brought him cookies every holiday season. And when someone new moved into the neighborhood, they always came by to introduce themselves. Jason wasn't just a homeowner anymore, he was a neighbor, a good one. One day, Jason sat on his porch watching the sunset. His dog Max lay beside him, snoring softly. The street was quiet, peaceful, just how he liked it. He looked across the fence where Marjorie's house used to stand. Now, a young couple lived there. They had 2 kids, a golden retriever, and a lot of energy. They were friendly, respectful, always waved hello. Jason smiled. Maybe that's all he ever wanted, to live in peace, to protect what was his, and to remind everyone that kindness goes both ways, because when you give respect, you get it back, and when you take it for granted, well, somebody might just hook your hose to a sewage tank.